Hello and welcome to Around the Region. I'm your host, Whitney Stinson. On the show tonight, the United Way has easy avenues for you to donate to multiple charities and nonprofits at the same time. They've become a staple in our community, and we're going to talk about this year's fundraising season in just a little bit. But first, affordable housing and homelessness has become a big issue in our community. The people spearheading the project to end homelessness take the chair right now on Around the Region. Thank you so much for joining us. Here in studio now is Melissa and Michael. They are part of the plan to end homelessness in Lloydminster, Homes for All, or the Lloydminster Social Action Coalition Society. Is that
Perfect.
right? Ha! Thank you so much for being on the show today, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's talk a little bit about this study that you did. 135 people were found in some form of homelessness in the city. Now, that's not a great number either. There's some categories where you thought that was a pretty accurate number, and there's some categories where you're not. One category that you did think it was an accurate number was the absolute homeless. Talk to me a little bit about those people.
Sure. The absolute are those that are on the street or in completely unsuitable housing situations. And the total was 28, but the shocking part was finding 4 children living in that.
I couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
No one expected that. And when you review this, Alberta's plan to end homelessness in 10 years, 14% of your population, or of the homeless population, is your absolute. So I think that kind of can give you a picture, if you consider that that's 14% of our homeless, how big the other portion of homelessness is within the city.
Definitely, and that's almost unfortunate, because that's the homeless that people see, and that's the homeless that people identify with, right? And that's the homeless that, for the most part, people are less likely to help. Is that correct?
Well, yes, because a number of people think of the absolute homeless, the street people, and they say, well, that's a choice. That's a lifestyle choice.
Exactly,
So they've chosen to be addicted to substances, to be alcoholics or whatever. It's their choice. They could go back home wherever they came from. They could be in one of the shelters, that kind of thing. So people are pretty, often dismissive of them and say, well, we can't help them. It's their choice. If they want to clean up their act, they can, kind of thing.
Right. And they could go to a shelter or something, which is the next category you had, was the sheltered homeless, and that was the people in the Lloydminster Men's Shelter or the interval home, fairly obvious. The next category was the hidden homeless, which I thought was very interesting. Now, these are people who are able to avoid the shelters and avoid the street, but they still don't have a permanent address. I guess, what is the criteria to be in that category?
I think the most significant is those that are couch surfing or living in overcrowded situations. And we didn't begin to capture that number. I mean, I think part of it, just knowing the wait list for Alberta and Saskatchewan assisted housing, as well as the Métis housing wait list, those numbers are actually very large. So, and then the stories we've heard lots of stories, particularly with new immigrants from other countries that are here providing very essential services, and they are living in an overcrowded situation. And unfortunately, it's really hard to get everybody out to be counted.
Definitely, yeah.
And so we definitely heard some stories. The interviewers found it very humbling to hear those stories.
Were you one of those interviewers, Michael?
Yes. And what we found was that at least some of the people that fall into this category, they don't like to think of themselves as homeless, or they think of homeless as being the people on the street. So the fact that they're hanging out at some friend's house for now, they don't even think of themselves as homeless. The other thing is that the whole label of homeless is a negative one, and so there's a certain stigma to that, and so maybe in the future homeless counts, we maybe it may be good to come up with a different name than saying homeless.
So something a little bit less, victim sounding or less sort of absolute sounding, I guess. Would
exactly.
Be, yeah. And, there's also the relative homeless here, which I never even thought of before, but people who pay a significant amount of their income on housing are at risk of losing their house, which, duh, you say it out loud, and obviously you're like, yeah, of course, but how were you able to capture that number?
Again, we put it out there in our advertisements to encourage people and explain that if you spend more than 30% of your take-home pay, that's one reason you'd be in the relative homeless. So again, it was definitely under-captured. On our hotline, I know a few of the people that are on AISH, that's the Alberta Assistance, they called in and they said actually anybody on AISH would be more than 30%
really?
of their
Okay.
take home. So we know that that number is very large as well, and obviously was undercounted.
Well, this is a fantastic study you guys did. We're going to talk more about it and what the government is going to do about it just on the other side of this break.